What if I told you that one of the richest musicians in the world started out with nothing? No record deal, no industry support, and no safety net. Before the luxury cars, private jets, and billion-dollar business deals, Jay-Z was standing on the corners of Brooklyn, trying to survive. This is the story of how Sean Carter turned hustle into hip-hop, music into money, and eventually became a millionaire long before the industry truly accepted him. Jay-Z was born Sean Corey Carter in 1969 and raised in the Marcy Projects of Brooklyn, New York. This wasn't a glamorous upbringing. The Marcy Projects were filled with poverty, violence, and limited opportunities. Jay-Z has openly talked about how selling drugs wasn't about ambition, it was about survival. He watched his mother struggle. He watched friends get locked up or killed, and for a long time, the streets felt like the only option. But even back then, Jay-Z had something different. He had a sharp mind, especially for numbers. And he had a talent for storytelling. Music became his escape. Rapping wasn't just entertainment. It was a way to describe the reality around him. In the early 1990s, Jay-Z tried to break into the music industry like everyone else. And he failed. Record labels didn't want him. They said he was too street, too old. Not marketable enough. Most artists would have quit at that point. But Jay-Z made a critical decision that changed everything. If the industry wouldn't invest in him, he would invest in himself. This wasn't just a label, it was a business move. Jay-Z used money he'd made from the streets to fund his debut album. No advances, no corporate backing, just risk. In 1996, he released Reasonable Doubt. The album didn't explode overnight, but it sold steadily. More importantly, Jay-Z owned it. Every CD sold meant real money going directly into his pocket. This was the first step toward becoming a millionaire. Raised in the Marcy Projects of Brooklyn, New York. If you weren't from there, you didn't understand it. The elevators barely worked. The walls were cracked. Crime wasn't something you heard about. It was something you lived inside. Jay-Z's father left when he was young, leaving his mother, Gloria Carter, to raise 4 kids on her own. Money was tight. Options were limited. Jay-Z has said many times that he didn't grow up dreaming of becoming rich. He grew up trying to survive. The streets offered fast money. School offered slow hope. And in neighborhoods like Marcy, hope doesn't pay bills. By his teenage years, Jay-Z was already involved in drug dealing, not because he loved it, but because it worked. But even then, he noticed something. Most people around him weren't thinking long-term. They were thinking day-to-day. Jay-Z was different. He watched patterns. He studied behavior. He learned how money moved. The streets taught him business, just not the legal kind. Music wasn't a dream at first. It was an outlet. Jay-Z began freestyling, battling, and telling stories about the life he saw every day. His lyrics weren't fantasies. They were documentaries. He rapped about hustling because that was his reality. But something stood out. He had an incredible memory. He rarely wrote lyrics down. He could construct full verses in his head. This wasn't just talent. It was discipline. Jay-Z realized that rap could be more than expression. It could be an exit. But getting out wasn't easy. The early 1990s hip-hop industry wasn't friendly to artists like him. He didn't fit the mold. He wasn't flashy enough. He wasn't young enough. And most importantly, he wasn't controllable. Jay-Z shopped his music to record labels, over and over again. And the answer was always the same. No. Executives didn't see a superstar. They saw a risk. They wanted artists they could mold, package, and own. Jay-Z wanted control. That scared them. This is where most people quit. Rejection hits the ego. Failure feels personal. But Jay-Z didn't internalize rejection. He analyzed it. And then he made one of the most important decisions of his life. If nobody would sign him, he would sign himself. Jay-Z teamed up with Damon Dash and Kareem Biggs Burke. Together they formed Rockefeller Records. This wasn't a passion project. It was a business strategy. Jay-Z funded his own album using money he had saved from the streets. This was a huge risk. If the album failed, everything was gone. In 1996, Reasonable Doubt was released. No radio push, no major label machine, just pure hustle. They sold CDs out of car trunks. They promoted records manually. They built demand from the ground up. The album didn't explode instantly, but it did something more important. It proved Jay-Z could sell. And he owned the masters. Every sale mattered. This is when Jay-Z made his first real millions. Not overnight, but steadily. While other rappers were spending money to look rich, Jay-Z was studying how to stay rich. He watched contracts closely. He learned about royalties. He learned about leverage. Jay-Z treated rap like a startup. Each album was a product. Each tour was marketing. Each feature was expansion. By the late 1990s, his albums were going platinum, but he didn't celebrate too long. Because Jay-Z understood something most artists don't. Music careers are short. Ownership lasts forever. So he started planning his next move. Jay-Z launched Rocawear, a clothing brand rooted in hip-hop culture. This wasn't merch. This was fashion. At its peak, Rocawear generated hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And Jay-Z didn't just lend his name, he owned it. Later, he sold the brand for a massive payout, proving once again that he knew when to enter and when to exit. This is when Jay-Z crossed from millionaire to mogul. Music gave him visibility. Business gave him security. Not every move worked. Jay-Z faced public feuds. Business partnerships collapsed. Critics doubted his relevance. But he never panicked. He adapted. One of his smartest moves was becoming president of Def Jam Recordings. He learned how the industry worked from the inside. He saw how artists were controlled. He saw how money flowed. And when he left smarter. Jay-Z's wealth didn't come from music alone. It came from principles. Own what you create. Invest early. Think long-term. Never rely on one income stream. He once said, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman." That wasn't a punchline. That was a philosophy. Jay-Z didn't chase money. He built systems that produced it. Jay-Z didn't escape the streets by luck. He escaped through vision. He understood that talent opens doors, but ownership keeps them open. His story proves that where you start does not determine where you finish. And the real lesson isn't rap. It's mindset, because the blueprint isn't just music, it's strategy. Jay-Z became a billionaire the same way he survived the streets, piece by piece. From the outside, people saw luxury, cars, art, champagne. But wealth wasn't the point. Control was. While the world focused on his music, Jay-Z was quietly building an empire behind the scenes. He understood something early. Music makes you famous. Ownership makes you wealthy. So he stopped thinking like an artist and started thinking like an investor. He owned his masters. He built brands. He took equity instead of paychecks. When others cashed out, he doubled down. Every move was strategic. Every partnership calculated. Streaming changed the industry, and Jay-Z didn't fight it. He owned it. Tidal wasn't about competing with platforms. It was about artist ownership. Alcohol wasn't about nightlife. It was about legacy brands. Art wasn't decoration. It was asset diversification. Real estate wasn't flashy. It was stability, and while critics laughed at some of the moves, the numbers kept growing. Slow, quiet, relentless. Until one day, the headline finally caught up to the reality. Jay-Z is a billionaire. Not because he rapped the most. Not because he sold the most records. But because he owned the most value. He turned culture into capital. Influence into infrastructure. Talent into systems that printed wealth. The same streets that taught him survival, taught him leverage, and the same mindset that got him out, kept him on top. Jay-Z didn't just beat the odds. He rewrote them. Because real wealth isn't about money. It's about freedom, and that's the final level.